this
yes,
movie.
I
Talk about what you did with the prosthetics, and I love that, the art, because of course that's what Laurence Olivier always did.
He always
was
put
the
an
master.
extra. Yes, he loved a different nose for every performance, and Vivian Leigh famously made a remark about when Laurence Olivier played, and I am going to say The Scottish Gentleman by Shakespeare, just because we are sort of in a theatre, and I am so superstitious about that particular play. Anyway, she said, in that production, it was 1937 at the Old Vic, she said, first of all, you heard Larry's first line, then you saw Larry's makeup, then you saw Banquo, and then you saw Larry. The makeup was so thick, so he was. She teased him about that. With the night before we started shooting My Week with Marilyn, we tried our third attempt at this prosthetic chin. I got these two spots on here. I got no lips to speak of. He didn't have much of a top lip, but he had a big full bottom lip, and the given there was nothing else to hide behind, some attempt to sort of change my rather doughy features into the slightly sharper, slightly sculpted look of Sir Laurence was dependent on this square chin. So we'd tried, one version we put it on and it went all pear-shaped, and we tried another version. We realised you had to sit in a chair in a particular way because gravity had to work with the latex while it was drying. And eventually, whatever it was 8 o'clock the night before we were going to start shooting, and they all came in. Harvey came in, and Simon Curtis, David Parfitt, and so there was this group of, Oscar-winning film producers and directors were gathered over my chin, looking at it. First of all, saying, "Well, can you see the join?" "No, we can't see the join." "Do you think it works?" "Look at it in the profile." "What about? Well, look from." And then the DP was looking from behind and below, and then it was like halfway. So we also got to go. I got to get up at whatever 5 o'clock. And Simon, of course, finally had the casting vote. "We're going for it. We're going for Larry's chin. The chin is a go." And so that was, but a bit nerve-wracking the next morning because it wasn't a huge budget. So we didn't have like 6 chins lined up. We had one. It didn't work. It was all over, and fixing them when they go wrong is a problem. But it was psychologically, as I looked in the mirror, with no facial hair, no glasses, no nothing. There were like 3 or 4 elements that were important. The parting, which in the role and in his life at that point was so severe, it was like you had to sort of vacuum clean out any spare hairs. It was like done with a razor blade, and then the sort of blue-grey tint, the eyebrows with the special sort of arch, and then this lip, which really did, once you, as a lipless man, when you looked at it, it definitely gave you that extra thing. And when in certain lights, although I don't look like him, don't sound like him, there was there's a look in his eye, a sort of dead-eyed look that he often used. That one every now and again with that lip and lit the right way, even I could sort of smell you could just get the scent of him a bit, and so the chin was a sort of big part of the illusion for me, in order to try and create the illusion for them.
Now we all know a lot about Olivier as an actor on screen and everything, but you must have needed to know what was he like on a movie set. How did he behave? What was his way of? I mean, were you really trying to get that right, or was that more interpretive for you?
Well, it's a good question. It was a bit of both, I suppose. I mean, I was very happily a detective in all of it. So was Michelle, going everywhere and anywhere to try and get information. I went just sort of the sort of kind of what's the word? The kind of summoning up the thing was included going to the choir school where he in central London, where he was a chorister to begin with. That had a strange and sort of moving element to it that made me feel as I was getting closer. I visited Knockley Abbey, the place the country home he had with Vivian Leigh, lived in at this time and commuted to when he was making the film. And accounts of his time there were interesting. I remember working with John Gielgud, and he spoke of him, and he did say that he was this. That what Olivier was many people, and across one day, and particularly at Knockley Abbey, he could sometimes be the great master of the estate, that sometimes he was the sort of passionate gardener, sometimes he was the master of the revels with games, sometimes he was the artist alone with his thoughts, didn't want to talk to anybody, but he was very fully every one of those things each time. And when it came to working on set, Tony Hopkins, for instance, said that he did love it. He worked with him, of course, many times, but on film he worked with him on Mutiny on the Bounty in this is about 83, I guess. Yeah, 82, 83. And he did enjoy himself, and he liked that. He got very drunk with them one night, and went right back into the Marilyn experience. And clearly, I mean, he was still smarting about some of it, you know. And that was.
So he didn't direct another movie for 16 years.
That's right. Yeah.
That's
right.
how traumatic it was.
Well, it was that. Plus, I think that Olivier was impatient with the medium and cross with the medium. As you know, he famously said to William Wyler, I suppose great acting isn't good enough for this anemic little medium. This was when playing Heathcliff, and when he told the story against himself, you know, about his arrogance with filming. But I think that he was hurt by the fact that Richard III was not the box office success that he hoped for after the huge success of Henry V, the double Oscar win for The Hamlet, and then, although very successful and a brilliant, sensational performance as Richard III, almost his greatest screen performance, it played for one day in America in cinemas. You know, it was one of those special event things in sometime in, I think, 55, 56, where it played for matinees on one Wednesday across those. So it did an enormous amount of business on that day, but it was even then unrealistic to expect that it could have a theatrical run. The business wasn't, you know, inviting people to go and see Shakespeare movies much. He was annoyed by that. He couldn't get the money together for his film version of the Scottish play, and I think he couldn't wait. He was such an impatient fella, and he also, I think, was in this sort of tension between what he said repeatedly was the best job in the world. He said directing movies. When he says it in an interview with Kenneth Tynan called Great Acting from the early 60s. You find it online. And he says it again. And when you really do believe, if he was many people, I believed him absolutely when he'd say that directing a movie really is the best job in the world. I mean, and I think that he stopped himself getting drugged by the years that he might spend trying to raise the money for the next one. And so 16 years.
But if he was impatient and loved directing, this was not an ideal scenario.
Exactly. Hence the I think extraordinary frustration he felt, and he did like to run things, and I think that it was a central problem to him that, having had the magical meeting with Marilyn in New York, some 6 months before they were due to shoot, where he was enchanted by her, and where, you know, things were cut through. She was the biggest movie star in the world, and even it was she, the very next day after a meeting where they'd waited for her, but then they had the meeting, and she was angelic, and he was enchanted by her. It was her the next day who said, shouldn't we do something legal and contractual about this? And she actually, you know, really pushed for it to be settled in a way that movies rarely are. So Olivier left that knowing he had a deal. There was a movie. This impatient man had a movie because his boss was Marilyn Monroe. And that was great to begin with, because the movie got greenlit like that. But it was difficult because, you know, this leader of men, this you know, Sir Laurence Olivier, the head of the theatrical profession, is sort of...
He's sort of laid low.
Yeah.
I mean, humbled.
Unmanned almost. He was, as they both were in their different ways, very, very sensitive to the respect that was his due. I think that he was happy to be a collaborator and roll his sleeves up and do all that and be one of the team. Both Jacobi and Hopkins talk about this quality in him, but it was with the understanding that that was the license given by the man who was undeniably the boss, and everybody understood that. And I think that Marilyn, although she came in feeling that, in the end just didn't see that, and he felt it. He felt the disrespect. It wasn't so much even, I think, her turning up late, though that infuriated him. It was that in her search for what she needed, the truth in the performance, or this self-belief or whatever it was that may have been missing, he just became irrelevant, I think. He wasn't used to that being the case in those around him. He was used to being the centre of things, I think, and I think he was perplexed by it, and actually he was in the position sometimes maybe the world is with Marilyn Monroe. He wanted to be her friend, and he was ultimately sort of superfluous.
That's what's great about this movie, though. You've got all these people, behaving the way people behave in these situations.
Yeah.
We recognize anyone who's been on a movie set. The actors are narcissistic. That's what was great about Judi Dench's character, Sybil Thornton, being, really, is it Thorndike?
Thorndike, yeah.
Being
right.
More, interested and sympathetic to Marilyn than he was.
Well,
he was jealous of her.
I think he was. I think that she was employing him, and she refused to, sort of play the game of being intimidated. To some extent, also Sybil Thorndike, and I think it's true in the movie that moment was from life, where she said, "Are you trying to help her, or are you bullying her?" Because she had no fear of Olivier, because she gave him one of his first jobs when he was a kid, and it was in fact she saw him when he was 8 years old in a school play. That's how long she'd known Olivier for. And she said to his father, a story that he used to quote, Olivier's father said to Dame Sybil, "Did you see my son? My son was playing Brutus." She said, "Yes, your son is already a great actor," which is a story Olivier liked to tell. But yes, she had an unusual sort of easy humanity that was famous theatrically. And of course, Judi Dench has that for free as well.
Yeah,
she's like and I don't mean this in a sort of silly way, she's like the mother of the company. The thing that Judi brings, that actually Michelle had as well, it certainly is a down-to-earth quality, but in all the really fine people I've worked with, is this childlike quality, and also this nervousness. So on a Sunday morning in Pinewood, when we all showed up at the very first read-through of this thing, in the same soundstage around a big table, just absolutely looking like the production stills from 50 years previously, the most sort of wide-eyed and sort of excitedly anxious was Judi Dench. Not nervous like she wouldn't do it, but just excited. And Michelle had some of that as well. And it's somehow that it's a great when people who are so very good at what they do have that. It puts your own mind, because everybody else is nervous too. It puts your mind at rest. And but I think Olivier didn't particularly like to show that himself. I think he liked to appear to be unflappable.